there's this Breitbart article that came out, which, I mean, it may as well be parody because it certainly feels like parody. It's from somebody by the name of John Nolte. And he wrote this on September 10th. It just got to my eyeballs recently. But I have to talk about it. So the title is, Howard Stern proves Democrats want unvaccinated Trump voters dead. So for those of you who don't know what he's tangentially referring to here, what happened recently is Howard Stern on his show started going really full pro-vaccine. And I think the genesis of it is that, the news that Joe Rogan had gotten COVID, and there were all these news articles that said Rogan was taking horse dewormer ivermectin in order to fight off his COVID. Now, the fact of the matter is, it's a little more complicated than that. He wasn't taking the animal version of ivermectin. He was taking the human version of ivermectin prescribed to him by a doctor. Now, of course, as you guys know, and I've talked about on this show quite a bit, there's really not good evidence that ivermectin is effective in fighting COVID. But what Joe Rogan said is, I'm, quote, throwing the kitchen sink at it. So not only did he take ivermectin, he also took monoclonal antibodies, which is the thing that likely saved Donald Trump. And he took, probably 3 or 4 other things as well. And thankfully, Joe Rogan got better within the course of a day or two. So, that's positive. But Howard Stern went out there and said, by telling people you're taking horse dewormer effectively, you're incentivizing others to do that. And really, we should only be talking about the vaccine because we have this thing that's effectively a cure. And then, of course, Howard Stern went off on I think at the time it was 4 conservative radio hosts who have died from COVID, and they were very vocally anti-vaccine. And I think all of them at that point had a deathbed transition where they were like, oh my God, I was so wrong, I should have taken the vaccine. Well, now, by the way, that number has ticked up. I think now the number is like 6 or 7 conservative radio hosts and other like very influential at the local level conservative political figures that have died from COVID. So, Howard Stern in typical Howard Stern fashion was sort of, berating people to get the vaccine and saying, hey, jackasses, look at the evidence, look at what's happening. Like, you have to get it. You have to get it. It's the only logical conclusion. So this guy, John Nolte, heard the Howard Stern segment, and then comes this article. So here's what he says. Do you want to know why I think Howard Stern is going full monster with his mockery of 3 fellow human beings who died of the coronavirus? Because leftists like Stern and CNNLOL, he actually wrote CNNLOL in all caps, one word. And by the way, talk about LOL. LOL at the idea that Howard Stern is a leftist. That CNN are leftists. They just group everybody together who's slightly left of Genghis Khan. So he continues, because leftists like Howard Stern and CNNLOL and Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Anthony Fauci are deliberately looking to manipulate Trump supporters into not getting vaccinated. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. He continues, nothing else makes sense to me. Well, that says a lot about you, doesn't it? In a country where elections are decided on razor-thin margins, does it not benefit one side if their opponents simply drop dead? I mean, even to this point, you could see, if anything, there's a sense of projection in this. There's a sense of, well, this is how I would think if I was them. He says, if I wanted to use reverse psychology to convince people not to get a life-saving vaccination, I would do exactly what Stern and the left are doing. I would bully and taunt and mock and ridicule you for not getting vaccinated, knowing the human response would be, hey, fuck you, I'm never getting vaccinated. And why is that a perfectly human response? Because no one ever wants to feel like they are being bullied or ridiculed or mocked or pushed into doing anything. Who wants to cave to a piece of shit like Howard Stern or Jimmy Kimmel or these repulsive doctors refusing to treat the unvaccinated? Or Bette Midler? Or, by the way, the idea of doctors refusing to treat the unvaccinated is a myth. We covered the story. The headlines were misleading when you read the specifics. After a shift, a bunch of nurses and doctors gave a press conference and said, for the love of God, get vaccinated. We don't want to have to treat these people anymore, and we're also having to turn away people who don't have COVID and have other illnesses because there's not enough beds. So for the love of God, get vaccinated. But that was twisted as if they were saying we're not going to treat any more unvaccinated patients. There was one doctor who said that, and the doctor said the doctor isn't an emergency room physician or in an ICU or anything. It's just a general practitioner who said, I'm telling my patients who come, if you don't get the vaccine, I can't treat you anymore. Because, basically his argument was, I've had patients who didn't have the vaccine and they died and it hurts and I don't want to have to feel that pain again. So I'm letting everybody know it's either like we're breaking up as doctor and patient unless you get the vaccine. Now, you can criticize that, but it's certainly overstated the way he's saying it here. He continues, who wants to feel like they're caving to a guy who's such a piece of shit, he publicly mocks people who have died. And he's not just a piece of shit mocking them, he's a piece of shit hurting the families the dead men left behind. No one wants to cave to a piece of shit like that, or a scumbag like Fauci, or any of the scumbags at CNNLOL, so we don't. What's the result? They're all vaccinated, and we're not. And when you look at the numbers, the only numbers that matter, which is who's dying, it's overwhelmingly the unvaccinated who are dying, and they have just manipulated millions of their political enemies into the unvaccinated camp. This is astonishing. As I saw somebody say on Twitter, now what conservatism has boiled down to is like 4D chess about owning the libs. That's what we're talking about here. The other massive ironic piece of this is you guys always talk about personal responsibility and agency, and the buck stops with you, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And here you have an instance where you're looking to point fingers at everybody else and everything else and the other camp in order to feel like, well, we're vindicated in doing the thing that I also admit is wrong, is incorrect, is not right. Man, this is really, really, really sad. You would think that at some point, he would point out the obvious. That, well, look, ultimately, even if I think it is true that what they're doing is counterproductive in the sense that people on the conservative side aren't getting the vaccine because of it, I'm going to put the onus on the people not getting the vaccine, and I'm going to tell you, for the love of God, get the vaccine. Instead, it's always like, I forgot the question. The answer is, blame the libs. Or as he says, blame the leftists, of which he includes Nancy Pelosi. What? So, I mean, right off the bat, you know that this person's, breakdown of politics is phenomenally unnuanced and very didactic and black and white and tribal. But this is really out there, man. Could you imagine writing this article and not stopping and, reflecting and realizing that you're embarrassing yourself? So somehow it's the libs' fault. By the way, whether or not, you think it's a productive strategy to shame people effectively, I think it's relatively obvious that, of course, Howard Stern and anybody who's ever mocked the unvaccinated for being unvaccinated, that is coming from a place of, holy shit, you're making a terrible decision, and I'm so perplexed by that and astounded by that I don't know how to react other than to say, what are you doing? Don't do that. It's like if conservatives started touching hot stoves because the left was like, for the love of God, don't touch the hot stove. I might not like you personally, but I don't want you burning your hand off. I mean, that's effectively what's going on here. And I also think they have a problem separating things out like that. Like, I could disagree with somebody politically on everything, but I still don't want them to, die a painful death and, make their family miserable as a result of them being gone and just inflict pain and suffering on people. I have this conversation every time somebody passes away who is sort of like a monster. You guys will see, I never really celebrate death. There are times where I get it when people, if it's like a war criminal, okay, I sort of get it why you would celebrate the death. But I very rarely go down that path because I have a principled stance against pain and suffering and death. I don't even wish it on my worst enemies because I find that deeply unhumanitarian. I don't know if that's a word, but you guys get what I'm saying. I find that's deeply disturbing to me. that, I feel like that's very close to flirting with, if I don't like somebody, maybe they should be denied medical care, or maybe terrible things should happen to them. That sort of makes me a piece of shit if I go down that road. So even if I dislike somebody, disagree with somebody, yell at somebody, shame somebody, it is true that in some instances that's not effective and that is the wrong path. But it also is the case, I still genuinely want stuff for those people. That's not bad. That's not negative. I don't want them to be in pain. I don't want them to die. So everybody's better off as well when we're all vaccinated. At some point, you hit herd immunity. It is true. Like, well over 95% of the people dying right now and 95% of the people hospitalized are unvaccinated. So if we yell at people, it comes from a good place, believe it or not. Now, again, they don't believe it because they don't think about their political opponents like that. They wish all the harm in the world on us. But I promise you, that's not how I feel about it. It's just not how I feel about it. I saw, it's interesting too, because there was a clip I watched the other day where Ben Shapiro makes a similar point, not as stupid as this, but he makes a point that's like, I'm tired of the unvaccinated being shamed by the left. And then he goes on in the rest of the clip to viciously shame the vaccinated. Now, he's vaccinated too, but he shames the vaccinated for not acting as if the vaccine works. So in other words, there are plenty of vaccinated people who still wear masks everywhere and still don't want to meet with people and, are overly cautious. So he's got no problem shaming the vaccinated in very vituperative and clear ways and yelling at them. But the whole point of the segment was, stop shaming the unvaccinated. So you don't see that contradiction, Ben? And, very few people have clear standards on this across the board. But what we're dealing with here, this is as dumb of a response as you could get. This is twisting yourself into a pretzel to take responsibility away from the people who aren't getting vaccinated. Look, I said it before. I absolutely feel sympathy for those who have been brainwashed into not getting vaccinated. And I have some sympathy, but not as much for the people who are sort of leading that charge in the unvaxxed camp. But ultimately, I want everybody to be healthy, and I want everybody to be happy, and I want everybody to survive this thing. So if it's Howard Stern, or if it's myself, or if it's others shaming people, I swear to you, it comes from a good place. And by the way, I'd also take issue with the idea that it is shaming. Because with Joe Biden's speech wasn't even close to shaming. Joe Biden's speech was, honestly, just straight talk on the issue of the vaccine. I'm talking about, of course, the speech where he said, we're unveiling a new policy, and the policy is businesses with 100 employees or more, you either have to get vaccinated or test weekly. I think everything he said in that speech was just straight talk. He was just being accurate with people. He was just telling the truth. He was just being honest. And, there's this funny thing that happens. Everybody always wants the president to tell the truth until the president tells a politically incorrect truth, and then all of a sudden it's, oh, my fifis, you should be more understanding. Don't use that tone, I'm sensitive. So anyway, there you have it. Look, I'll read the title for you one more time. This is something else. Howard Stern proves Democrats want unvaccinated Trump voters dead. So in other words, if you beg and if you plead and if you're aggressive in trying to get people vaccinated, they say, oh, you're just using reverse psychology on me and you want me to go unvaccinated. By the way, if all these people listed in this article told people, hey, don't get vaccinated, what would their takeaway be? Oh, they're using reverse psychology to make us get vaccinated. No, their take would be they want us dead. So if the left tells you to get vaccinated, they want us dead. If they tell you not to get vaccinated, they want us dead. It's almost like you're just always twisting it in your mind to blame the left and blame the libs. That is what it is. Because ultimately, this is what modern day conservatism in many ways has boiled down to. It is 4D chess about triggering the libs. That's what it, and that's not, here's the main point, guys. That is not an ideology to base your worldview around. And functionally, that's stupid. That's dumb. Now, I'm sorry if you feel under attack or shamed because I'm saying something that's true, but truth is always a defense. And so, ultimately, that's the point about Howard Stern. I don't know whether or not it's effective. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But truth is always a defense. And I think the stuff he was saying to unvaccinated people, like, this is silly, you should do it, it's accurate. So, of course, I'm going to defend him on that front. But there you have it. There's always this thing that happens. Everybody wants to hear the truth unless it's presented in like a mean way, and then it's like, well, you should care more about my feelings than the truth and be more artful and crafty and clever in how you deliver it. Or you should write in articles and you're the personal responsibility people that says, take personal responsibility and get the vaccine, all the data is clear. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.